If you are abrupt with them, rude, condescending, any of that nature, you may stop that child or that student from learning to fly. They may give it up just because of your attitude. But if you tell them, dude, you aced that touch and go, or that was smooth as a baby's butt. You can't say that on the radio, but you know what I mean. If you let them know how they did, even if it's just a good job, dude, you may keep that kid in there so long that they become a commercial pilot.
Remember back in middle school when we all learned about Venn diagrams? You know, the circles where each one represents a characteristic, and then where they overlap, you have two characteristics at once, but that's the thing that the marketing department's probably looking for, right? Anyway, when it comes to aviation, one that always keeps coming up is men, women, and pilots. Like, not all men are pilots, not all pilots are men. Not all women are pilots, not all pilots are women. But where the overlap part comes in, well, those are the individuals who are maybe women and pilots. Anyway, stay with me. I'm actually going somewhere with this. There's another Venn diagram that keeps coming up too, and it's where the pilot circle overlaps with the controller circle. There's this little tiny sliver where I find myself, along with a few others who play both sides of the mic. It's cozy in here. And if you want to hang out, you're going to find me, Clay Taylor from Airways Magazine, RH and AG from Opposing Bases, maybe a few others. And that little sliver gets really small when you talk about controllers who are current pilots, not were, or I've got the certificate, or back in another lifetime, or something like that. But anyway, today's guest is pretty noteworthy because she's got a little bit of every circle I've mentioned thus far, and is generally known as one of those best in the West controllers around, or was at least, and we'll get to that. But she comes from a tower pretty similar to mine, and from what I've heard, she knows how to rock a mic on either side. Today's going to be a fun day. And today, we're broadcasting as always from West Coast Delta, a mythical yet oh so real place, and this is a podcast where we share the backstories behind all we do in Air World. Sometimes we're on the flying side, sometimes we're on the ATC side, and sometimes we're on both sides. And from what the feedback tells me, those are your favorites. So you're going to be glad you listened today, because that's exactly what's about to happen. Now, I mentioned Venn diagrams earlier, and we find ourselves in a really tiny overlap, but I've got just one more little circle to add that'll make the tiniest little sliver you've ever seen. What about not only controllers who are pilots, but those that are pilots that are current? And how about those who are both that are women? And how about those who actually care? Like people who don't just hold certificates and go to work and that's what it is, but people who go to work because it's their purpose. Like it's way more than just a job. Well, in this little sliver of the Venn diagram, everybody knows each other's names. So today, I want to introduce you to Pam. So what's it like? Actually, do you have any other questions for me before we start? Or?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay, right on. So what are things like actually in Texas right now with all the craziness in the world?
You know, it's really sad because every time I go out the door, I see people that are just standing away from everyone. They don't interact with anyone at all. And if they do, it's just a wave. Whereas before you would have gone up to someone and talked to them. This is Texas. You know, we get up to people and talk. And it's not like that. It's very disheartening to see it. And I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all.
Yeah. I mean, and especially kind of going into retirement that way with the sort of like, hey, I'm going to go out and do all these things now. And then,
Yes.
no, you're not. What does that feel like?
Well, as you know, I'm medically retired because I'm losing my vision. So I have this huge bucket list. And I had an entire summer planned in Europe. That's gone. I can't even get over there. And if I get over there, I may not get back. I've already been stuck once. So all that is on hold. And we don't even know when it's going to come back. We've actually planned trips for next year, starting January 18th. And I'm just praying we get to actually go on these trips because I want to see them before I can't see them. It's important to me. I want to go back and see the things I haven't had the chance to see.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you've seen a lot of stuff in your career. And we are here with Pam from McKinney Tower, formerly at least. And Pam is here for just so many different reasons, but ultimately a great recommendation from our mutual friend, Chad Fortenberry, who's a longtime friend of this show. But Pam, you've been known, at least I've heard from more than one source, that you're sort of one of those best in the West type controllers. And that's my favorite kind of controller to talk to. And I think for all the pilots out there, that's their favorite kind of controller to talk to also. So you have so much background that it's really hard for somebody like me even to find where to start. But you are on the show today for very, very, very good reason. So can you give us, just so people know where all this is coming from, where did you come from?
Well, I'm from Georgia, from right outside of Atlanta, and I have been in aviation from birth. My dad flew C-124 Globemasters in the military, and then he got out and he became a controller at Atlanta Center. And he retired after 21 years, but we had our own plane. He ferried planes as well, so we flew all the time. And I actually learned to fly in a 46 Stinson, a tail dragger. And my dad would allow me to land by myself. He was in the plane, but he would allow me to land by myself at about 9 or 10. So I have always flown, and I've always been with ATC. I would sleep outside, not outside, I would sleep in the center under the console on midshifts with my dad because I just like being there. And back then, no one cared if a child was in a big place like Atlanta Center. So it's been my entire life. I've never not known aviation, and I love it. So when I learned to fly, it just opened up even more for me. I absolutely cannot imagine another life. This was my dream life, and I had it for 37 years.
Wow. So you literally got to absorb aviation even while you slept.
I did. I surely did.
That's incredible.
The Aviation is a set field. There's so few people in it compared to the world population, and they're a different caliber of people. I don't know. It just takes a different kind of person to be a pilot or a controller, and they're all good people. I love them. They're the best, the absolute best.
Actually, I don't want to let that one go by without hitting that a little bit before we move on. What do you think? What personality characteristics do you think really make the best pilots and controllers? Because a lot of people say it's technical stuff. A lot of people say it's just an authoritarian or authoritative personality. And I know there are times when that does come in handy, but I think there's a lot more to it. So what do you think?
I think that it takes a person with compassion, because you're working with kids a lot of times that have absolutely no clue what they're doing. They're just parroting their instructor. And you can make or break that pilot at a very early stage in their training. If you are a real abrupt controller and you don't take any time with them, especially when you hear them, stuttering or just trying to get it out, or you even hear that parroting going on. If you are abrupt with them, rude, condescending, any of that nature, you may stop that child or that student from learning to fly. They may give it up just because of your attitude. But if you tell them, dude, you aced that touch and go, or that was smooth as a baby's butt. You can't say that on the radio, but you know what I mean. If you let them know how they did, even if it's just a good job, dude, you may keep that kid in there so long that they become a commercial pilot. I've met some of my students. They're not mine. I didn't teach them to fly, but they're mine in the sense that I held their hand through their training. And I've met some of them now as commercial pilots. And it's so awesome. It is phenomenal to get on a plane and say, I did that. Truly, I didn't. But I held that kid's hand, and now he's my pilot in the 7-6. How awesome is that? You just can't beat it. But it takes a controller to be strong and control their pattern, control their traffic correctly. But my gosh, you've got to use some just enough common decency with these kids so that they know, you've got their best at heart. You're going to take care of them. And I do. Every one of them are mine.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you said that, because the first part is kind of what everybody always hears. And, it kills me when I stand up in front of pilot groups, or I, talk to people individually, and they think that, there's this vision, and I've kind of put it together, and it looks sort of something like a NASA launch center with a bunch of us looking in our little skinny ties and big glasses and just basically dictating some
Yeah.
recipe of how it's going to work, and with complete lack of emotion or anything. And to some degree, yes, you shouldn't be too emotional, but at the same time, you just said it so perfectly, that those little things and having that depth of character really adds to the experience. And particularly for people like you and I that work in these really busy Class Delta type airports, where that's where aviation starts, right?
It is. It surely is. And when you have a new student come up in the tower, and everybody up there is welcoming, is like, here, let me show you how this works. Let me just give you a background on how all these positions work. That person leaves there with a much broader sense of the overall picture. And they may be kind of, what's the word, ramped up or whatever, major excited when they're in the plane. But once you've shown them that you are just the same as they are, we're just doing a job, and you've shown them how things work and how they play together, my goodness, their attitude in that plane totally changes in a lot of respects. And it takes both of us for you to fly in a pattern, especially a busy pattern. And if I know that that person is giving me their all and they're working their level best, then we're both going to make a much better pattern out of this, and if they're trying as well, gosh, it's so much easier.
Yeah. One thing I always get is sort of, those questions they sort of end in, well, what's the answer? What do you prefer, this or that, A or B? And you're sort of like, I wish I could tell you that, because I don't want to make a bigger deal out of something than it is. But what you just said really illustrates that point, that, there isn't always an answer in a lot of things. And for something that's relatively technical, there is
Hmm.
still actually a fair amount of gray area too. And
Yeah,
that's good, because clearly, I mean, it says right in the .65, there is no way that anybody could make a uniform set of rules that would cover all circumstances. So guess what? Sometimes you just have to use your best judgment, right? And
hmm,
and and whether you're a pilot or a controller or a surgeon, or frankly anything that's safety sensitive, I mean, that's what makes you good. And
yeah,
what you just said, to the point of, if I know you're doing your best and I'm doing my best and we're collaborating and everything's on the up and up, then guess what? You're free to be good. Everybody's
yeah.
free to be good. And I feel like that's the attitude I want to really convey, be it through this podcast or anything else that I do, is I want you to be free, because when you're free, you can be good. And when you're good, you're safe and efficient.
Exactly. And once they are confident in you as well as them, listen, we're just this voice in their ear. They don't necessarily trust us until they know us a little bit. Same with us. When I have a pilot come in and he's stuttering, or he says he's 10 miles east, north, south, or foreign language even, and all you can get out of him is he's 14 miles somewhere, you don't have any confidence, and it's got to be built a little bit. But once they have confidence in us, they become a lot easier in their. They're not so tightly wound, and they become a lot easier to work with. And you start hearing the confidence in their transmissions as they're becoming more comfortable. They've gotten the big picture a little bit now. My gosh, it is the most amazing thing to hear that from a kid that flew in, a month ago, and all you heard was stuttering and parroting, to all of a sudden you've got this pilot, a real pilot that's comfortable, and he's just doing what he's told, and he's making good choices. If I forget to say something, he queries me on it instead of turning a base in front of somebody. It's amazing when you hear that. I love to see that. I love to hear it. And I love it when they come up and say, doing this made a difference. Even if it's just one thing you've said and it made a difference, that's enough. You've done your job.
Of course. And before we depart the fix on this one, just one last point is you right at the beginning, you said when they know you, and I know what you meant was just, you've been working
Yeah.
together for 5 minutes and we're comfortable now. But there's a bigger thing there too that, I mean, I have this, you have this. When you're a well-known voice at a facility because you've been there for a long time, or you're known as, being a really, really strong controller, or for whatever other reason, maybe you're active in the pilot community or do a podcast or who knows, but people tend to know your voice, right? You know them, or sorry, they know you, you don't know them, but you're known. I had a controller, coworker of mine the other day, and to him, and he said this, and I quote, "I don't want to be one of the ones who's known. I just want to slip in and slip out undetected, do my job. That's basically it. But I don't really want anybody to know my voice from anybody else's voice." And I said, that's valid. And he's a very strong controller, one of the best at the facility, actually. But at the same time, I found it interesting that for a controller that's that good to have the attitude of, I don't really want to be known, it kind of, it felt a little bit weird for me. But what about for you? Because you're definitely one of the ones who is known.
No, I don't like that. I want when somebody comes in, especially with a new student, I want them to go, hey, you know what? This lady is going to treat you with respect and courtesy. And sometimes you're going to get that was great, dude, out of her. So you want to strive for that because she's not going to lead you down the wrong path. I want them to know that I am there for them. I not to say anything about anyone, but I worked with a female, and there's not a lot of females in ATC, but I worked with one that had a really bad attitude, and I didn't want them to think it was me when they came to the facility I was working at. When they came in the pattern, I did not want that because good Lord, I would go down to give a talk at one of the flight schools and they would say, are you that mean one or the nice one? I'm like, oh my Lord, I don't want to be known as that person. And I don't go out of my way. I'm not overt in the fact that I'm going to sugarcoat everything and be the sweetest person on the radio. When I'm busy, there is no time whatsoever for anything but my commands and you listen to me. And that's how it has to be because I've got to maintain the safety. So that's how it is. But if I'm not that busy and I know you're brand new and I know you need some hand holding, by God, you're going to get it. You will get exactly what I can give you to help you. And I will always use a kind voice. Even if I have to have you call me afterward, it's going to be said very nicely. I'm going to explain what we could have done better between the two of us. And that's the end of it. But there will always be courtesy and always treat someone with respect. I mean, that's what everyone is due.
Yeah. I actually got a string of text messages that were very, very apologetic once. And I was playing outside with my kids. We were riding our bikes and it was like, I'm sorry. I don't know what my student did. I apologize. I won't, I don't know what you're talking about right now. And like, around 2:00, you got really upset with me for whatever. I'm like, at 2:00, I was at home and they just confused me with someone else. And I don't honestly know how you're going to confuse my voice or your voice with anyone else, frankly. But, that is always something that scares me is that you're going to be confused for not you and it's going to be in a bad way.
Yes. And, I don't like it. I don't like it at all because I really, truly try my best to make sure. I want to make sure you're treated correctly at all cost. I mean, I will go out of my way to make sure. And I want people to know it's me. I've been retired now a little over 2 years, and it still hurts when I look up in the air. Sorry about that. But I get text messages and emails and stuff on Facebook all the time. And it just makes me happy. I get the best comments sometimes.
No, absolutely. It's just it. I don't think people understand how seriously and how important some people, take this. It is not just a job. And
It is.
and it turns into that sometimes. It feels like it sometimes on, 4 days in on your, 8th hour of an overtime shift on a 6-day work week. But that's petty because it ultimately it is not just a job.
It is. And, just when you have someone's life in your hands, a lot of people's lives in your hands, and you have to do your level best. And the way to get your level best and their level best is to treat people with decency and courtesy and respect, and make it fun if you can. I mean, when you're too busy, I mean, that's all there is. But it should be something everybody enjoys. My gosh, you're getting to fly a plane. How much more joyful is anything? That's it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to go back and we left off a moment ago with 10-year-old Pam is sleeping at the center and you got to witness things that were sort of, how do I say, the new guard is a little different than the old guard. What was it like back in the day when your father was a controller?
Well, he was they were using non-radar. Non-radar. Can you imagine that?
Wow, at the center?
Well, not for the most part, but there were several times because you always had to be prepared for when the radars went down. So they still practice religiously non-radar. And I thought, my Lord, I don't ever want to do this. I thought it was going to be way too complicated and something I was not interested in doing. But the more I saw it and the bigger the facilities were getting, it kind of changed my mind. And plus, I got to go out to the tower all the time as well. And that's where my heart lay. I love radar. I love a no gyro PIR approach better than anybody on the earth. But I want to be able to see my planes. So when I would go to the tower, I realized that's where I was going to be. And the easiest way for me to do that was to go through the Air Force. So what you don't know is my brother and sister were also controllers. And my mama helped my dad learn Atlanta's airspace. Atlanta Center has got some serious mileage. And my mother could, for the longest time, she could say, "Oh, I know where that fix is," or something. You're like, "Really?" And whenever we would all talk, the four of us together, my mom joined right in because she knew all the lingo. And it was like there were 5 controllers in our house full time. It was it was a really neat way to grow up.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm having this vision of like in the Matrix where your mother is like the Oracle.
Pretty much was. And she could have, I think my mom could have walked right in and become a controller pretty much anywhere after all the time she spent studying with all of us. My brother and sister both went Air Force and were controllers Air Force as well. My sister radar, and my brother at 3 towers in the Air Force. But I spent 4 years at Hill Air Force Base, and then 15 years in RAF Upper Heyford, England.
Wow, it's amazing. How cool would that be to get to actually control traffic in another country? It's one of the sort of, you think about that sometimes, like, hey, can I get a transfer to, I don't know, fill in the blank somewhere cool in Europe or whatever. But through the military, you actually had a chance to do that.
Oh, I got to tell you, working in England was phenomenal because you had purple airspace whenever the Queen flew, things you would never, ever see. And if I was down at, we had something called in the RAPCOM, it's called the RAS, Radar Advisory Service Zone. It's the only one in the world. And basically, you have to provide advisories because the majority of the pilots there are VFR only. And you have our military jets just screaming across the sky. And here's a little guy that just flies right in front of them. He's just, oh. So it was quite busy. But the different aircraft you got to see, was just unbelievable. I mean, we can't see them over here. And it was just amazing. It was the best 15 years ever.
So, with all that experience, then how did you end up breaking into the civilian world of controlling?
When I came back to America, I actually flew in and took the exam for the FAA. And I made a 98.9 on the exam. And I just knew I was going to walk right in the door. And I was 31. But I knew that there was supposedly a program at that time for military controllers. So I was very excited. I didn't get called. I turned 32. I didn't get called, turned 33. And then I was diagnosed with cancer. So I spent some time taking care of that. And when I finally got to the point where I thought I was going to walk in the door again, they stopped with the waivers. So I applied to go civilian with Barton Aviation. And that's how I got into the civilian contract tower program. And I did that in a couple of different places. And then had some more medical problems. So I was out for a little bit longer. And then I went right back in. So I've always been federal contract tower program since the military.
Okay. Wow. That's quite a road. But I mean, despite that, I hope people listening to this understand that everybody at some point, for the most part, probably 90% of people will run up against some sort of medical issue, be it
Oh, Lord.
large or small, that will in fact threaten your medical clearance to do your job or your pilot certificate or whatever it is. And I mean, I just had my medical last week and I've struggled with vision issues as well, but, just correctability thing. Luckily, nothing more than that. But, for me to do this, there are several hoops that I always have to jump through in order to stay there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I want people to understand that don't ever let a medical thing make you give up, because there are so many ways you can eventually get through. The process may be long, believe me, but do not give up, because you'll probably get it somehow or another.
Brandon, I guarantee you, because of the backlog and just the bureaucratic stuff you have to go through, it will take you a couple of years, but just fight through it, because, man, once you get it, it's just amazing to be back in it. And yeah, you'll have a lag there, because every single time a .65 comes out, something has changed at great lengths throughout the book, and you've got to learn again. But you can overcome that learning curve just to get back in it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get in it. Let's do some. Let's talk some shop. What do you think?
What you got?
Okay. So one of the things Chad and I were talking about a while back was that sometimes it seems like and there are exceptions to this, of course, but like our student world is not being taught as well as they could on the radios. And not just in terms of memorizing the suggested phraseology in the pilot controller glossary and the AIM and things like that, but really, truly that upper level communication that you were discussing earlier. What do you think about that? Has it gotten better or worse over time, stayed about the same?
I think it's gotten by far worse. And the reason I say that is what I've been doing to keep myself in ATC or aviation is I do radio talks, and I teach situational awareness and just basic radio skills. And a lot of the students that I'm picking up come to me just ready for their solo, and they've not used the radio. I'm like, how can you not have used the radio? You're flying a plane. That's one part of it, but you've got to be able to communicate. I mean, that's key. And they'll say, well, the instructor just wanted me to learn the plane. Once I learn to fly, they're going to let me. That's not how it works. It's got to be a combination. Your skills have got to be there for getting your idea across or getting the information across. And so these people, they come to me and they can barely, first off, they're petrified of the radio and they're scared of the controller and they can barely get the basic information out. And I I just can't believe that has the way it has become. I mean, I was never taught that way. You had to learn at the same time, so everything meshed together and it fit. I don't feel that they're getting the type of training I would like to see at the right time. I don't believe it at all. And they're not taught active listening either. I mean, active listening increases your safety so much, and they just don't have it.
Yeah,
It,
I want to talk about this so much right now, and we're going to in just a minute. But that active listening thing, you just struck a nerve with me because that right there is the difference. I mean, that is it. When people ask, what is, what do pilots do, or what could pilots improve on, or what should I be teaching my students, or whatever, it's that is the best I've ever. Thank you for saying that. That is exactly what it is. Is on one half you have the passive listening. I hear my call sign. I do what Pam told me to do. Right. Okay. Turn base now. Clear to land. Great. Clear touch and go. Whatever. But that active listening is what really puts you on that other level. It separates you from the primates. Really is.
it does.
Yeah. I can now visualize this controller's plan too. So now we're working together. I'm not just, this isn't a one-way street anymore. Active
Right.
listening is what makes it no longer a one-way street.
Yeah. And if you can get someone to actively listen and be aware of the entire situation going on around them, so situational awareness, you've got a pilot.
Exactly. Yeah. And, to the point of the solo thing too, just to take one more second on the soapbox is, when you solo, a lot of people think that's like the first third of your training. Like the first third is solo, the second middle third is cross countries, and then the final third would be check ride prep. And that's what a lot of those, like the commercially available syllabuses, whatever, that's what they make them kind of make it look like. But, I'm going to be honest, unless you're in a cornfield in the Midwest and soloing literally just means taking an aircraft around the pattern once by yourself, and if the engine quits, you can glide it in,
Yeah.
maybe. But in the reality of flying in busy airspace, be it at McKinney or, West Coast Delta or wherever, I mean, the solo is like 2/3 or 3/4 of your license. I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of content and in terms of importance, because to be honest, by the time you're soloing, you are going out by yourself to the airport, getting an aircraft, you got the keys, you have to plan it, pre-flight it, go out, do all the maneuvers, blah, 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 come back. And sure, you have to do it within less than 50 miles or whatever. But at the end of the day, that is the only thing that matters. Then teaching someone to navigate cross country, that is a small percentage. And then by the time they're done with that, let's be honest, how much check ride prep should you need, right? So when somebody solos, you are not, if the minimum is 40 hours or 35 if you're 141 or whatever, but that is not 10 hours is solo, 10 hours is cross country, 10 hours is check ride. But that's not how that works at all. I mean, in my airport, the typical student time to solo is like 25 hours. Sometimes it's 30. Just because it's that busy. There's so much terrain, so much airspace, so many other airplanes, but that's how long it takes. And, the idea that somebody would have soloed without touching the radios at a busy place like your airport or mine, that's absurd.
It's scary is what it is. And I try to explain to them that, practice makes perfect here. And once you practice, we will go through scenarios repeatedly for probably about 30 hours total. And by the time they're done with me, they have had almost every crazy thing I could ask a normal pilot in the scenarios. And I make them understand what they're doing, why we're doing it, how it fits into the entire picture. And they now know how to answer in the event that it happens with them. But I've told them you've got to be prepared for anything that can happen. And I want them to practice so that it becomes almost rote memory. It's like when you get in the car, you don't think, oh, insert key, turn to the right. You don't, that no longer comes into play. You now know how to respond because you've been taught. And the ability to do this is going to save your life. It's an advanced, I don't know, it's an advanced layer maybe of protection for yourself because you now have the ability to make the decisions and follow through on them that you need to because you've already experienced it practicing. And if your instructor's not teaching you that, man, you need to ask for some help because you do not want to get in a plane and not have been taught what can happen in those odd situations. What do you do if there's an emergency and you're in the pattern and you're a young pilot, not even a rated pilot, but a young student? You need to know how to get the heck out of Dodge, and you need to know what to do, not just freeze. You've still got to keep that plane in the sky, but you've got to communicate to me as well. And if you're not taught how to communicate, we're going to have a jam. We're going to have some serious problems.
You bet. And, I think what happens right there is I can just picture this, like the exact moment that the software stops functioning, right? When you get that little shot of adrenaline, you're like, oh God, what do I do?
Yep.
What I do not want, and the thing I caution against, and I've said this to probably every pilot group I've ever stood in front of, they ask, what is the proper phraseology for this? Or how do I say this thing or that or whatever? And my answer is, sort of a little tongue in cheek, but I'm like, I don't care what your phraseology is at that point. But I mean, if you have an emergency, there are a couple of things we need in air traffic. We need to know the type of the emergency. We need to know the nature of the emergency and the type of aircraft and the pilot's desires. That's pretty much it to get an emergency going. And I mean, if I have even one of those bits of information, I'll get it going. But that's what the book says is those three. But I'm always kind of bummed out when I hear that, the thing that people are concerned about is what's the specific phraseology I need to say. Like they're talking to a computer, because they're not. They're talking to you. They're talking to Pam. They're talking to Brandon. They're talking to whoever, right? They're talking to a real person with a lot of experience and who does this all day, every day. Sort of like talking to a doctor. It's going to be real hard to shock your doctor, right? So, but you're afraid to. Like you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. Don't be afraid to say the wrong thing, because the thing is, if you need to say something, you just need to say it. Like in whatever words come out, you say those words. Mayday might help, but you get the idea. But to the point we made earlier about when we're collaborating and you're free and whatever, that's the feeling that I want people to have. Is they're like, you know what, I'm new at this. I am, even if they are, or if they're a 20,000-hour airline captain, I don't care. I want them to feel good and confident, because the thing is, when you're confident and you're comfortable, then you're free to be good. And that's what I want to hear. I mean, we have to be pretty careful with our phraseology, at least the first time around. But for pilots, the buzzwords, the things to say, the info I need. Just say it, and don't be afraid of talking to me or talking to Pam or talking to a robot. Just talk. And then you're free to be good, and you're not scared anymore, and you're going to think better, and we're all going to do better.
Yeah, plain English in my book is golden. If you can't figure out what to say, don't sit there and keep flying a plane and not say something. Pop it out. Plain English works. I just need something to figure out what to do with you. And if you can just tell me the basics, I can work around it. And, the whole thing is to get you on the ground safely. So whatever we need to do, I don't care. Phraseology has to go out the window. It's automatic in my mind. I will probably say the correct phraseology because it's been done so long. But I'll take whatever you can give me. I just want you safe.
Of course. So I guess the tired point we're making here is that there's a happy medium between perfect phraseology and just saying it.
Yep, there is. And using the correct phraseology does, stop with a lot of the confusion. Everybody knows that. But there is a time for proper phraseology and a time to just get it out. I'll take whatever you can give me. I just need to be able to help you.
Yeah. So let's talk about pilots then who don't understand what we're saying to them, because there's a couple sticking points of phraseology that I've probably made known maybe not on the show, but that are a little bit confusing, and not least of which would be hold short readbacks in their entirety, continue traffic will be holding in position, things like
Hmm.
that are a little, and especially that one because, for airports that have an ASDX and runway safety equipment, they can clear someone to land with someone in position. I can't, but that is definitely a sticking point for a lot of pilots. What do we do when somebody doesn't understand what we're saying to them?
You change it up. You say it a different way. And if that works, all good and well. If it doesn't, then you have to totally think about another way to say something, or basically a visual description. You may have to go speak a little bit longer to explain to them what you're doing. I have to paint a picture for a pilot. Um, and I talk fast when I'm busy, but I will paint you a picture that you can figure it out if you can't understand it from my words. I will do that to make it so you do have it. Um, One of the things that you have to be concerned about as well is the way things are heard. You're talking over a radio. Some may have good radio, some may have, crap. So things are not always as clear. And also the choice of words. I used to say when somebody was coming down the VOR, it's a crazy VOR at McKinney, and it ends at a terrible angle to the runway, but that's the way it is. And if I couldn't quite figure out where they were going to fit in the pattern, I would say, just continue. Just continue sounds like discontinue on a lot of radios. And I had no idea what was happening with this one pilot. He just broke off and started flying. I'm like, huh? What's going on? And he told me, you said discontinue. I'm like, did I? No, I didn't. I said, and I realized just continue does sound like discontinue. So from that day on, I stopped saying that. But I had said it for years and no one ever called me out on it. So I try to make sure that the words I'm saying will actually sound like the words they should be when it's going over a radio, and you don't have the best, sound systems in your planes or radios. But I think that as long as you tell me, especially if it's a student, as long as you tell me you're a student, when you come in my pattern, I will speak in the best word or verbiage I can get out of myself to make sure you're going to understand me. I won't give you anything that's convoluted. I won't give you any long drawn out stuff. I will give you just the basics and work you that way. If I can tell by your voice, by your transmissions, that you are a new student, I will do the same thing. Because after all, I'm there to help you. I am there for you. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always we have to say things right the first time, but then there's obviously a little bit of leeway in that. If you've already told me you're a student pilot, then I think that kind of takes that down a notch. But, a lot of people don't realize that after that first time where we say it in proper phraseology from the point 65, we
Hmm.
can use plain language to describe anything after that.
We can.
So there should be no hesitation to say, I don't know what that means, or, whatever comes out. But if you don't understand an instruction, the scary thing is when people do what they think that you said or meant or whatever, and it's not right, but they didn't say anything. So they just made up or did the thing they were going to do anyway or whatever, because they didn't want to come back and say, hey, I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you say my instructions again? Or can you explain that? Or I don't have the traffic. Can you just call my base? Whatever it is. It scares me that people just do it anyway.
Exactly. Even worse, I've given someone a short approach because they came in all confident sounding. They didn't tell me they were a student, and they're in a Cirrus. I mean, seriously, I expect a pilot in a Cirrus because that's a pretty strong little aircraft. And I gave him a short approach, and he didn't say unable, I'm a student, or no, I'll just extend. He didn't do any of that. He says, okay. And I thought, my Lord have mercy. I'm going to have to break the man out because he just did his own thing. It was a nice little 30-degree bank there, turning. He was not a short approach anywhere near it. And all he had to do was say unable or I'm a student. But he didn't do that because I told him to do it, and he should have.
Yeah. I mean, there should be no surprise there. But fun fact: if we offer you something like a short approach, I'm not. I'm going to stop short of saying solicit. But if we offer a short approach as an option or something like that, and you
Hmm.
don't want to do it, yeah, just say unable, and I promise you, no one's going to be surprised by that. You know,
No.
it was an offer. It's like, hey, if you really want to do this, we can make this really efficient. But if you're not interested, then hey, that's cool. I totally understand. But anytime I offer someone a short approach, if they don't take it, that is no sweat for me. I 50-50 you're going to go for it anyway.
Yeah, and we've always got a plan B, C, D, and everything else in our back pocket. We don't go with just one plan. If we don't have that, the whole world's going to fall apart. So, because we're always expecting the world to fall apart, so we have all these backup plans. And unable is nothing. It doesn't do a thing. We're happy. Just tell us.
The
So we,
alternative to unable short approach isn't okay, you're going to crash into something and die. The alternative is Roger, extend downwind, you're number 3.
yeah,
That's the alternative. It's nothing bad.
nothing big at all. Nothing at all. And a lot of people are really afraid to say, no, I won't do it. Unable, dude, works like a charm. I don't care. I just need to know, you know.
Yeah, and the last thing a controller is going to come back if you say I'm unable to do something. Now, I usually say, hey, look, if you say unable to something, maybe offer something you can do. But if you're not really sure why the instruction or the offer was given,
Hmm.
unable is actually completely fine. And there is no controller in the NAS that'll go out and say, well, I need you to do this, off the wall play or something like that. There's far too much liability and safety on our side to try to talk you into doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Hmm. Exactly. We do not, the paperwork, the paperwork's going to be bad if something like that were to happen. So we're just as happy as we can be to change it up however it suits you or however, it needs to be. It's no big deal at all. None at all. And no, like you said, no controller is going to be bothered by it. We've got all these backups. It's fine. Do whatever you need, but just keep me in the loop so I know. Don't keep a secret.
Yeah, exactly. It's that two-way communication again and active listening, isn't it?
Yep, that's it.
All right. So let's do this. Sometimes it gets busy, and this could be not just at a tower, probably not a tower, more like a Tracon or center or something like that. But in times of weather, or in times of a big reroute and you're already airborne, or
Hmm.
things that may take a couple of minutes to retype into an FMS or a GPS or something like that. What what would you like, or how do you handle it when you're going to give an instruction to a pilot and you're thinking, you know what, this is going to take this person a minute to figure this out? Or if they can't get the fix in the box quick enough or need something like a vector for weather or whatever, these sort of off the cuff situations that are going to get a little complicated real fast. How do we handle that versus the routine stuff?
You just do what is necessary at that time. If the weather's going to in a VFR tower, if the weather's going down and I see it's coming down, I'm going to give you a suggested heading. I'm going to get you around it. I'll bring you in. However, whatever runway you need, I will work it to get you in on the ground, and I will get you around any weather I can find. If it's just a matter of you're an IFR qualified pilot and you're trying to get everything in, I'll keep you with me. I'll get you around everything again until you can get all your information in. I would hope that you are not with me at a VFR tower, but things happen. And you have to do what is necessary for safety of flight. So we will go out of our way to make sure you have the time to get everything in. If not that, we'll get you to a controller at while you can still safely change frequencies, we'll get you to someone and have them pick you up almost immediately. We'll be coordinated behind the scenes. So you go straight to the approach or departure, whatever you need. But we will always keep you with us or with someone else while we make changes necessary.
Sure. I feel like there's a lot of professional pilots out there that are unwilling to ask for help. I mean, not any one group in particular, but people have been flying either professionally or maybe just privately for decades or whatever. And what if they're not sure how exactly to ask for help? Is there a way that we can kind of figure that out and maybe offer a little nugget that'll get things moving again?
I can't help you if I don't know there's a problem. So just, you know what? I need some help. I am unsure where I am. I can't see anything to help me locate where I am. Anything. Just give me a heads up that you need help. Don't hold back. I need to know in order to help you. I can't help you if I don't know about it. And there are all kinds of ways we can have you ident. We can give you a squawk code so we can see you. We will find you if you're lost. We can do whatever is necessary if we have the information that you need help. Don't don't ever be afraid to ask for help because you will definitely get it if we know that you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes we just need to figure it out. Or you can hear in someone's voice say, maybe you should just spell that fix out for them. Something like
Yeah,
that.
and,
Yeah.
and you do it all the time. That's just common. We don't even think about it. If they come back and they're really hesitant on copying something down, you just do it automatically.
So what do you think about this? I get this question all the time. Literally every time I think I've ever stood up in front of a group of pilots, and maybe you do too. What what do you prefer when somebody calls, "Hey, McKinney Tower, this is Cessna 12345 over blank and blank inbound for touch and goes with information Delta," or do you
Hmm.
prefer, "Hey, McKinney Tower, Cessna 12345, click," and then you got
Oh,
to go back? What's your preference?
because if they just tell you what you want up front, then that's just the two transmissions. You tell me what you want, I'll tell you what to do. If you do the back and forth, McKinney Tower, this is Cessna 123, click. Cessna 123, McKinney Tower. Cessna 123, we're inbound for touch and go. Where are you? It's just back and forth. It's, wasted transmissions and wasted time. If you come into a busy facility like McKinney, when we are just slammed, you're going to get the hold outside the Delta because I don't have time to be back and forth on the radio. I just don't have it. So I'll hold you for 2 or 3 minutes and hope that you figure out where you are or what you want so you can tell me on the next one time you get it. I just need one transmission, but a complete transmission, brief, concise, but I need the information.
Yeah. I completely agree. And what I always tell people is, back to our earlier point about let's think about this for a second. Let's work collaboratively here.
Hmm.
If you are coming into my airport and you're probably coming from the practice area or one of the common reporting points or so forth, and you're pointed straight at me and you've been pointed straight at me for 10 miles and you're descending, I am just waiting for that airplane to call me. I'm just
Yep.
waiting for it. I see you coming. Okay. So when you call, "Hey, West Coast Delta Towers is 12345, 10 north, touch and goes with Foxtrot." Great. I was expecting that. I'm ready. Inner right base, runway 24. However, if you're going to call me and say, "Hey, I am over here and we're going to be doing a photo mission 4 miles north of the airport at approximately 1500 with 10-mile legs east and west, working our way south, and we're a Cessna 206 and blah." Okay, that second one, that's when you say, "Hey, Tower 12345, click," because then I have a second to get ready for whatever you're about to tell me, and I can pay attention to that, and I can get back to you when I have the bandwidth to do so. But for the routine things, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Just say it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? The good thing is, at busy towers, normally somebody that's going to be doing that, doing surveys or even the pipeline guys, they will tell us on the phone before. So, so when they call up, we already know what's going to happen, and hopefully, it's in an area where we can work with them easily. But I've had the same thing you've had where they've called up and given you all this information, and you're furiously writing because you need this for when um, bring another controller in. You've got to make sure you've got all that correct. And oh my Lord, it just goes on forever sometimes. And planes are still flying towards your airport while this guy's giving this long drawn out reporting. And it's just, it's a little bit too much sometimes. I would prefer they call me on the phone ahead of time. If they can't, then, you've got to work with it.
Yeah. And maybe that was a little extreme of an example, but even if, you're the Cessna over the top at 3,000 and you just want to, simulate an engine failure on your student, your CFI, and okay, I'm going to pull the engine on this guy. Maybe we could just, we're right over the top of an airport. Let's see if he can spiral down and just make the emergency landing or whatever. It's not too crazy of a request, but, not something that really needed phone coordination, but at the same time, more than just I'm inbound for something routine. But yeah, that in those cases, I prefer the, give me a heads up thing. But if it's the routine stuff, then yeah.
Yeah. But I don't mind that at all. Not at all.
Of course. I was on, I made the mistake of going in one of the pilot controller forums on Facebook the other day. And I remembered very quickly why I don't hang out in those. And the question of the day, or should I say the argument of the day, was if the tower doesn't explicitly tell you to turn base, when do you turn base? Or can you turn base, or do you turn base at the 45 or the normal time, or words to that effect? But I think you know where I'm going with this. What do you think?
Well, there's about 80,000 people who have a different opinion, and it can be all kinds of things. If you're in closed traffic with me and I haven't done anything to change your base, you are free to turn that base on your normal base turn. But I have a controller friend that says absolutely not. You have to tell them when to turn base. And I just don't have time for that. If I am busy, I expect them to fly a normal pattern. And that's what I'm basing my sequencing on, is their ability to fly a normal pattern. And the first time they go around the pattern, for some reason, I have this clock in my head, and I normally can remember, he was about a 4-minute pattern, and that's fine. So I know exactly how it's going to work with my sequence. But there are several different, really pushy people who say different ways. And I am just totally happy with them turning a normal base. I'm not going to tell them to turn their base every single pattern. I'm just not going to do it. Now, if I extend them, normally I would say extend your down 1/2 a mile, then start your base, or then turn left base. I normally would tell them then, but not at a normal base.
Yeah. There was an article, and it was in one of the really early on AOPA e-pilots, like 10 or more, maybe 15 years ago now. And I looked back in the archive and I absolutely could not find it. But somebody wrote a really good article about this. And it was perfect because it explained it pretty much to a T what you should do. But here's the thing. And what's funny was every controller, or every, we'll say participant in this little exchange in the Facebook world, had a very strong opinion, like you said, and most of them were wrong. Or even if they weren't wrong, it was kind of like in politics where it's like half right-ish, or there's a point to be made. However, there's a lot more behind that point that needs to be made. And everyone goes for the sensational headline, right? And what made me crazy was not so much the banter, but that this one guy who's a CFI got in there, and I'm not going to name names, but this person said, I will turn the base at the normal time, even if I feel really uncomfortable doing it, but that's what you're supposed to do, so I do it anyway. And my head just about exploded because this was in the parking lot right before I walked into the facility. And I didn't post anything in there because I needed to calm down for a second. But that made me crazy, that if you ever feel uncomfortable to the point of, I really don't want to do this in an airplane, please don't do it. I don't care if it's a base turn or something else, don't do it. But what I want to say, and this is too long for a Facebook post, is this. You can turn base when you've been cleared, or when you have a sequence and that sequence is met. Okay.
Right.
The thing is, sometimes we miss that for whatever reason. I'd like to think not because we didn't pay attention or we're lazy, but just because maybe I was busy doing something else. And just because I wasn't talking on the radio doesn't mean I wasn't doing something else in the background. But here's the deal. You're a Cessna right downwind. And I've got a Learjet on a 7-mile final, right? And that Learjet has not checked in yet. For whatever reason, late handoff, they forgot to come over, they grabbed the wrong frequency, I don't care. They're not here. But they're straight in, they're going about 190 knots still, maybe 200. And I don't have them. Now, what if I'm in the background calling approach saying, hey, can you ship me that Learjet because I kind of need to talk to him, I got a busy pattern, or whatever. I'm not talking to you, though, and you're the Cessna on the right downwind. I haven't sequenced you. I haven't done anything. This guy turns base. We got a huge problem and it's going to happen so quick, I might not catch it in time. I'd like to think I would, but let's talk
Yeah.
about human factors. I might miss it. It's possible, right? So
Yeah.
here's the deal. You're Cessna 123 on the right downwind. If I have not cleared you or told you that you're number 2 to follow this Learjet that you don't know exists yet, it scares me that you would just go ahead and turn base. And it scares me even more that CFI guy who says you do it even if you feel uncomfortable is in there telling you to do it, right? So these are the thoughts that are going through my head as I walked up to the facility. But, there is nothing that says you can't turn base. So in this conversation that you and I are having here, there's nothing in the regs or the AIM or whatever that says you can't turn base theoretically. But here's the deal. Please don't, because that is stupid. I mean, if you don't have a sequence or a clearance or something like that, just ask, just say something. Hey, we're extending the right downwind, or 123 is a beam the numbers. I don't care.
Yeah.
But there could be so many situations we could what if all day long here. Why turning base would be a really, really bad idea. So my advice, and I'm feeling, I hope you agree with this, but you don't turn base unless you have a sequence or a clearance. And if you don't have either one of those, just speak up before you do it.
Well, you're exactly right. I was just assuming that was already done. But if they're on the downwind and I have already cleared them, and I can see as well, I can scroll out, and I would normally keep my stars at about 20 miles because I want that lead in so I can determine my sequence. So I will go ahead and tell them, even if I'm not talking to whatever's out there, you're inside of whatever's out there. And, I'll go back and say, keep your pattern tight. If that's not going to work and they've turned that base without me talking to somebody, or like I missed something, I'm going to fly them right through final and not let them turn to the final and get them out of the way. But legally, I shouldn't say legally. In my mind, they're not going to turn it unless I have given them a clearance. And I don't even normally think of it as a sequence. I've cleared them, and I'll get them in there if possible. If not, I'll change the whole setup. But you're right in what you're saying, that they need to be cleared or a sequence. But I don't even think about the sequence because to me that's already done. If I miss it, I'm praying that my coworker there is also back behind me, because it takes sometimes two of us to work it. But you are correct in what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is an unplanned base that happens so quick that even with stars,
Yeah.
it's not going to catch it. Actually, stars is probably worse than carts was, but just because the blending of all those things to put the position symbol, it kind of gets confused by real tight turns in a pattern. Whereas when you have the single sensor carts,
Yeah.
stars is better. Don't get me wrong, but that is a weird thing that we all had to get used to. But when it comes to, and of course I'm looking out the window too, but again, when it gets hazy, I'm 3 miles inland from the shore. Sometimes it's really hard, and we got to use the radar for position awareness a lot. And so, it can be hard to catch. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, the way I work at least is, if there's no one else and you're right down on a beam, I clear you touch and go, you're number one. You
Yeah.
can turn base at the normal time. Or if you're not number one, I'm not just going to say, I'm not going to issue the clearance till you got your traffic to follow, right? Unless you got your interval, I'm not issuing the clearance. So if you're number 2 or 3 or 8, I don't care. I said 11 the other day. That was kind of fun. But, at that point, I will call your base, or I'll call the traffic once you have a chance of seeing them, because they're 12 miles away from you right now on the other side. But, I'm not going to clear you for anything until you've reported your traffic in sight, right?
Exactly.
So Cessna 123, cleared touch and go. Or Cessna 123, extend downwind. Number 3, follow the Seneca on a 4-mile final.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear looking or traffic in sight. And when you say traffic in sight, number 3, cleared to land, cleared touch and go, whatever. But I work it, or that's my technique. And I realize it's not the only technique, but that's my technique, because then it's been built in a way that that's not going to happen probably, unless someone just goes rogue and does it themselves without saying anything. But yeah, if you're past the numbers or you don't have a sequence or something, do not just turn base, even if it makes you uncomfortable. That's the worst thing I've heard in a week.
No,
say something.
That's no, that's not acceptable, and that's just outright scary.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that there's a CFI out there saying that, Like, if you're a CFI, don't do that. Please don't tell anybody that.
Yeah. Mm-mm. No. And when you're wing up on that base, anything coming down final, you're blind to. You got to think about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's when, we're more relied upon, is that there are a great many blind spots in an
Mm.
aircraft, a great many. It's funny at towers too. A lot of people don't think about it. We have a great many blind spots too. The tower's configured a certain way. You're sitting in a certain spot, but there's a roof on that building. There are the posts that hold the roof up. There's the microwave in the back. It's not supposed to block anything, and it doesn't in ours. But you get my point. There could be somebody standing up behind you, a relief briefing taking place. There are blind spots everywhere, so we got to look out for each other.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. All right. Well, I love talking about this kind of stuff because it's just, I love to hear both that in other parts of the country, everyone's in agreement on this because we should all be providing similar service, contract, federal, whatever. But I always
Mhm.
fear that we get preachy too. We have these conversations. So I hope nobody feels like we're getting preachy, but these are really important things for, two busy Class Delta controllers to be talking about. But, in the background, I heard a comment that you actually had one of the best supervisors around, and that kind of is maybe a joke to people who know how the FAA works to actually like your supervisor. But tell me, why did you like the supervisor you had, and what made a good supervisor in air traffic?
Well, he's not actually my supervisor, but he's my absolute favorite controller of 37 years. And the reason he is number one, all right, he was former Navy and I was Air Force. So I just don't even understand how he's a controller. But he has the most skill and the most backup plans of any human I've ever worked with. I mean, it's amazing. I walked up one day and I'm supposed to relieve him. I'm just coming in. He's in local, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, my God, how many planes does he have? He had 16. We're a class Delta, and he is talking to 16 planes, and I'm thinking, there is no way I'm stepping in that position because I'm going down the tube right off the bat. And thankfully, he didn't want me to step in it because he was, one plane away from losing it if, somebody messed with him. But he is, he's got a sense of humor that is to die for. And he makes it a joy to work. And if he's the boss, if he's CIC when we're in working together and I'm busy, if he says to me, do this, I will immediately do it because I totally trust him. And his skill level is such that I know he's seen something I haven't. And it could be, a guy in the upwind turns his crosswind right into somebody coming down the downwind, or something that wasn't supposed to happen. It was sequenced, but the guy missed it or just misidentified the plane he was following, whatever. But John is the best controller I've ever worked with. And I just love him because I know he has my back. I mean, he has your back the minute you get in the facility. And that's the best feeling you can possibly have.
What was the most rewarding part of your career?
Ugh, it's not really rewarding in the classical sense, but I had a pilot, an F-16 pilot, that actually crashed and he died. This was at in Hill Air Force Base in Utah. But after his memorial, talking to his wife, she told me that he really, and she knew my name. And I was just stunned because, first off, I was enlisted. He was an officer. He was a higher ranking officer as well. But he was always up in the tower as a SOF, which is a supervisor of flying. He's up there in case there's an emergency. So he knew my name, and he had talked with me, talked to his wife about me. And he told her that I was an excellent controller. And he told her that he hoped his daughter grew up to be like me. That to me was the best thing to come out of an absolutely horrible situation. And I will never forget it. And when I went to Hayford, RAF Upper Hayford, after Hill, my next door neighbor was his best friend, and he knew my name. Now, how often does that happen? I'm in another country, but he knew my name because Major George had talked about me. And that to me, it was amazing. It isn't truly rewarding like you would expect, but it was amazing. And I didn't save a life. I didn't do anything. I was just, he just had an appreciation for my skills, and it meant the world.
So what are you involved in now? Where can people connect with Pam?
I'm doing the radio talks, the situational radio or situational awareness and radio talks. And if you just hit me up with my phone number, I will work with you as much as possible. I don't charge. I am just happy to stay in ATC. And I like showing people how it truly can be when you work with a tower that wants to work with you, and they enjoy working with you. And so that's what I'm doing.
I think you need to charge a lot of money for that, Pam. You can charge a lot.
No, I love it. It's just fun. And to hear somebody after a couple weeks talk to you and they have total confidence in their voice. And when you do a scenario and it's unusual and they just handle it, you're like, I did that, I did that. And it's just fun. It's really fun. I enjoy it.
Well, speaking of fun, and I enjoyed it, it's been just a great time and an honor to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
When I edited this talk, I kept having visions of that book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? And that's not the message I want to send out by sharing this talk, but I couldn't help feeling it. And after we recorded, I even felt a little bit of a reality check too. And I guess these last few months, well, they've been hard on everyone for one reason or another. And I may have slipped temporarily, I hope, into that group where, you kind of show up, you do the work and leave. And I don't know, I'm not really proud of it. But as we talked, I couldn't help but have some of Pam's enthusiasm rub off on me. And as I drove to work the next time, I was really able to remember why it is that I signed up to do this over a decade ago. But what do you think? Shoot me an email, Brandon@podcastingonaplane.com. Or better yet, you can use your smartphone or the SpeakPipe widget that pops up anytime you visit podcastingonaplane.com to record me something, and who knows, might end up on the show. And while you're on the website, maybe you can consider supporting the show. If you find value in it, I'd really appreciate having you on board as a patron. You get episodes a little bit early and sometimes other fun stuff too. And unfortunately, I don't have any new patrons to shout out this time. But if you want to hear your name read on the next show, go to podcastingonaplane.com and click on support. Or if you're not into the recurring thing, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Bravo Golf spelled out. Do a one-time thing in increments of just $3. Or if you want to take the easy way, just click the PayPal link. Let's face it, that's probably the best. Anyway, if you want to stay sharp on the mic, make sure to use the affiliate code DELTA at plainenglishsim.com. Get you 10% off the best smartphone-based ATC comm simulator around. There's, of course, a link in the show notes. And as always, I thank you so much for your support in whatever form it takes, and for listening to the show, and for passing the word about this or any of your favorite aviation podcasts along to a friend. That's all for now. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and you can report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day.
Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. Brandon's comments and those of his guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc., are not part of his official responsibility as a controller or as an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are his, and those of his guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. Also, while he's a CFI, he's not acting as your CFI, nor is he your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie and fun, but is in no way, shape or form professional advice or legal counsel. If you're in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.